Welcome to SlushHeap 201. This program is a follow-up of our regular Tuesday night SlushHeap show. Instead of a panel of guests, we are going one-on-one with guests we had during season number 1. Today's guest is very special to me because of two reasons. One is her story about her life-changing events, and because of her book. Kathryn Treat and I met about a year ago. Kathryn and I were on parallel paths of writing our first book about each of our lives. Being new to this thing called a blog, we were able to find each other, and it was really nice to find someone who cared enough to read about my blog. Of course, I in turn read her blog. One day she wrote on her blog, and the title of the piece was Return from the Battlefield. Of course, my first impression was, what possibly can she know about the battlefield? After I read it, I clearly understood what she was trying to say. Our battlefields are as diverse as the illnesses that brings us together, kind of. Kathryn's main contributor were her allergic reactions to molds, chemicals, as well as food allergies. Mine, on the other hand, were nightmares on a nightly basis of a single event in my life. I held on to this condition for 40 years until I finally went to the VA and was diagnosed with PTSD. Let me stop here. This is not about me, but let me give the floor to Kathryn, that says she may better explain the situation. So, Kathryn, can you explain to our audience how you became aware you were suffering from this affliction?
Shortly after I started working, I began getting sinus infections. Sinus infections that wouldn't go away. We did surgery, nothing seemed to work. Finally, I started getting, this is really disgusting, but I started getting black mucus out of my sinuses. And that's when my ENT decided to start culturing. And it took almost a year of cultures to get it to finally show up. And then shortly after, the sensitivity started showing up too, to foods and chemicals.
Okay. So you've been through, I'm sure, a slew of tests to get you to this point. How long of a battle has that been?
I became sick in 1999, and I'm still doing tests, and I'm still doing therapies, and I'm still limited on certain foods that I can eat. I'm limited on being able to go out into the public, to the stores without, I can now, fortunately, after so many years, can go to the mall, not the mall, but like a Target if I wear a charcoal mask and if I limit my exposures.
Okay. Well, I'm so amazed after all you've been through that you still smile and you have a wonderful sense of humor. This, of course, is going to bring me to the question of a story that you shared with me about a trip that you and your daughter had one day. So if you would like to tell our audience a little bit about that, they'll understand a little bit more about you.
Okay. First of all, I'm a mother of two. My daughters one lives 2.5 hours from me at the time, and the other one lives 45 minutes from me. My younger daughter came in from the Bay Area, we live in California, to visit. And we had planned to drive up to see her sister. However, in the meantime, my daughter goes and gets her hair colored and cut. And, that should have been a flag for both of us, but it wasn't. We get in the car. She has to wear a Tyvek suit. You've probably seen the white hazmat suits on television when they go into, dangerous situations. Well, people have to wear hazmat suits to come into my house or into my car to avoid bringing chemicals, molds, or anything else into my safe place. So we're driving down the road to my daughter's house. She's in her Tyvek suit, and we're going along. Maybe 10 miles into our drive, I started getting hoarse, started feeling kind of shaky, started getting a headache, and then just out of nowhere, we both realized it was her hair. So we pulled off to the side of the road, and couldn't go back home because we had to fix it right then. So we're trying to figure out what we're going to do. How are we going to, protect me from all the chemicals that she has on her hair? And so I pop open the trunk, and the only thing we could find is a white garbage bag. So here we are trying to put a white garbage bag on her head on the side of the road. She's in those big white suits, and it's breezy. We can't seem to get the bag to stay on her head because the wind gets underneath of it. It would poof up, like a balloon. Next thing I know, a highway patrolman pulls over in a big cruiser, steps out, kind of looks us over, and asked if he could help. And I had to explain, because really it's hard for people to understand. I had to explain to him that literally she was making me sick, and we had to get her hair covered. And he looks at her with her white suit and kind of makes one of those Ghostbuster kind of comments, from this, and and then he just walks right over to my daughter, holds onto the bag, gets the air out, ties it around the end, and her head's covered. And then the next thing he says is, "Can you move over? I need to write your license plate number down because I had to stop and assist you." Okay, so as he's leaving, he's telling us that, his wife, it bothers him when she gets her hair done. So, we're going down the road now. My daughter's got a white suit on. She's got a white garbage bag on top of her head, and we're driving. We have a 40-minute drive. A couple weeks later, our tenant comes to pay the rent. He's very familiar with, my illness, and he doesn't come in. We stand outside, and he's telling me he'd just come from, having coffee with his highway patrol friend buddies. And one of them mentions assisting these two women on the side of the road, putting a garbage bag over one of their, the other one's head. And they're all, of course, they're all laughing. And so then I start laughing because it's me. And so I finally had to say, okay, it's me. We're the ones, Laura and I are the ones that he had to help. And so then, of course, he begins laughing. And he's all excited now because he gets to go back and report that he knows the women that he stopped and helped, that they stopped and helped. And, it's just so funny. You don't think, it's funny enough when it happens, and you don't think that you're going to hear about it weeks later. What are the odds that somebody else knows the person that stopped you and helped you with the bags?
That's great.
It just shows some of the creative ways I've had to deal with things in order to keep from getting sick from chemicals.
How about that? See, those are the kind of stories you can't make up. You have to live through them.
Exactly.
About this, what is it, the 6 degrees of separation? Well,
yes.
It came back on you, didn't it?
Very quickly. 2 weeks wasn't a very long time.
No. So, anyhow, now that we have some background on your life, I got to ask you, what made you decide to write about your experience?
In the very beginning, I think I've been sick for maybe 5 years. And, how do you explain to people what you're going through? And then I started going to defense doctor appointments, and nobody believed me. My side did, but the defense side, chalked it up to I had a somatoform disorder. There was no proof, no matter how many tests we had showing my sensitivities, blood tests and skin tests. And I just began feeling that I needed to tell my story, and not just my story, not just because of me, but for all the women out there and men who suffer from this, who haven't had a voice in what has happened to them. And, some of them have lost spouses, they've left them because of this, and so I just felt the need to share my story so that others would understand how devastating mold is and how difficult it is to live with sensitivities to chemicals and foods.
So what came first, your blog or the beginning of your book?
The book. I started the book and decided that if I was going to get anyone to even know that the book existed, I needed to start blogging about it. And the original intention of the blog was for the book, but it turned out to be more of, yes, it's still about the book, but it turned out to be more of a connection with so many other men and women that share my problems, that it's been like a connection, a friendship I've developed with so many people. And now it's still telling my story, but it's also connecting with others that I did, I never expected the friendships and the compassion I've received from others through this blog.
Well, was that your first book, or have you published or written any other books besides this one?
This is my first book. I've never written anything. I never wrote stories. Except if I was required to in school, I didn't write stories. I never wrote poems. I never wrote, other than notes to family or friends, note cards. I never really wrote anything. And I just felt I had to tell my story. So I wrote it. Then I went back to my journals and started pulling things out of my journals to put some more realism into it, make it more heartfelt.
Okay. Well, what was the most difficult thing that you think about writing the book? Reliving my stories. I would start writing. That's why it took me almost 10 years to write this book. I started it, and I would write a chapter or two, put it away. A week later, I'd go to get it, pull it up on the computer, and I'd start reading from what I'd already written to know where I needed to continue going. And I would just break out in tears. I would have panic attacks. The depression would come on again. And I would have to just shut it down and walk away. And maybe a month later, I'd pull it out and be okay with it for a little while. And so the hardest part was reliving it and then reading my journals. I knew I was depressed. I knew how sad and lonely I was, but reading the journal pieces, it was almost like reading somebody else's story. It was like I couldn't believe what I'd written, because you write it and then you go on until the next day you write again. You don't go back and read your journals usually, and that was the hardest part. I think was reading the journals. So see, there's where you and I are so similar, because when my diagnosis came for PTSD, the solution that they had is I had to go through this 12-step program with the VA where they said you have to write your story down. I said, well, I'm doing it already. I'm doing it in a book. But then what you need to do is you need to read what you're writing every day. And next week when you come, bring it in with you and you have to read it to us. And I know exactly what you felt like, because every time, I guess when I wrote it, I didn't think that much about it because it just went real fast. But when I had to sit there and look at it again, this was almost worse than a nightmare,
Yes.
Because now like you said, you relive it, and that. But in the end, did it help you?
It did help me. I think what it did for me mostly was to realize how far I've come. I write and I talk about how depression was my daily companion. And now, while I still suffer from it, periodically, things will, a memory of something that I've had to throw away, or something that I can't do anymore, or something that I did that I, would never be able to do now. It pops, it'll rear its ugly head for a day, maybe a day or two. But I think the biggest thing is realizing that I am not that person.
You can't go back.
No.
No.
And I refuse to let myself get into. If I get depressed, I allow myself a day or two, but I refuse to go back to where I was before.
Okay.
I would sit up in the middle of the. There were nights I didn't sleep, and sometimes I wouldn't sleep for 36 hours, and I would be up in the middle of the night, couldn't sleep, on with the nightlight, and I would just pour my heart out into my journal. I never wrote poetry, and suddenly I was writing poems.
Well, that was my next question, because in your book there are poems that you've written about isolation and loneliness that you felt. When did you find yourself writing that?
Probably, I think it was in 2003. That was the year I spent almost a whole year away from my family. 2003 was a really rough year. I had a hysterectomy, which spiraled my chemical sensitivity and my allergies even more so. And that was in January of 2003. And in April, I had to have another sinus surgery because I had another bone infection. And there was just so many things happening that year that, and I was by myself. My husband would come to visit for a week at a time when he could. And, you know, I'd made friends, but, you know, at 2 o'clock in the morning, you're the only one that you can talk to is yourself. And so your journal becomes your friend. You cry at it, and you scream and you yell, and you know, sometimes the letters are in caps, and if I've had a particularly bad reaction, you can barely read my writing because my writing becomes almost illegible. And so I found 2003, maybe I think 2003 through probably 2005, when I was really battling my court case as well, was when I wrote the most detailed things in my journal.
Okay. Well, at one point you went to Dallas to the Environmental Health Center.
Yes.
What was the hardest part during your treatment there?
Because I went there three different times. The first time, the hardest part was I was so literally brain fogged. I would walk out of the testing room to go to the sauna, and I didn't know which way to go. And it was just to the left, the next door down. I would end up at the elevators before I realized I was in the wrong place. It was testing things that would set me off, send me into an anaphylactic reaction, and I ended up on oxygen, have to go home because the testing was over. It couldn't recover me enough to start again. It was the first time I was there, I was in an apartment by myself. It was a 2-bedroom. It was, you know, all tile floors, very minimal furniture. I have pictures of it in the book. And you'd walk on the floor and it would just echo. And I was there by myself. I'd never lived by myself. You know, I lived at home, got married, and that was it. And so finally I realized I could bring the television which sort of got 3 channels, and I would bring it into the bedroom, and I could close the door and kind of push the television up there where I felt safer because, you know, nobody could get into there as easy without me knowing. And I would lay in bed and try to watch television or listen to CDs. That was the hardest part the first year. The second year, it was just being back, having to go through the testing again. The third year was, you know, I got there in January, and I literally, except for a couple of short trips home, I stayed until 2 days before Christmas. And that was when my sensitivities were heightened from the surgery, and that was the hardest part because I actually had to test in an isolation booth at that point. And so, you know, I could see all the other people testing and talking and laughing, and I was by myself because they would, you know, if they had mold on their clothes, I would have a reaction, and then I couldn't test anywhere the rest of the day.
Right. So, in the book, you talk about, you know, losing your belongings, your identity, your friendship. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yes. In the beginning, it was the friendships. You know, people. I went to Dallas and expecting people to call me. Well, you know, with a few exceptions, I didn't get a lot of phone calls. And then I came home, and, you know, nobody came to visit. I didn't get invitations to. I could sit in their backyard, but I didn't get invitations. You know, like I said, with a few exceptions. And then when at the end of 2002, when I still wasn't getting well, even though I'd been in Dallas, we did a urine test and discovered I had really high levels of the trichothecene mycotoxins. And basically what I had done is I had not only contaminated got them from work, but I had brought all that home with me on my clothes. So my clothes were contaminated. My furniture was contaminated from sitting on it. My car was contaminated from being in it. My computer was contaminated from the spores and things getting aerosolized into the fan of the computer. I had to throw away literally every piece of clothing I owned. I had to get rid of my computer. And then when I came home in 2003, after I'd been home, my husband started going through my things. Well, I no longer could keep my favorite old teddy bear. My one-eyed teddy bear I'd had since a little girl. I had a Scotty dog that I had. Of course, it was losing its hair, but it was still my dog. My little stuffed dog, I nicknamed Gas Pipe. I don't know where that came from when I was a little girl. And I just, I just watched as my husband literally just threw them in the dumpster. I couldn't keep them. What was I going to do with them? And I could have maybe boxed them up in plastic and stored them away, but bottom line is you still can't have them. And I think for me, it would have been much easier had it been a fire. A fire comes, it's consumed, it's gone, it's gone. But when you have to see it and it's still there and you can't have it, but you have to throw it away, that was really hard. And then the identity problem, my hair's gray. I never had, I always colored my hair. I always had hair product in it, so it didn't look like it's, like I have no hair. I wore makeup. I wore nice clothes. It didn't matter if they had to be dry cleaned. I just, took them to the dry cleaners and I wore them. Didn't bother me. And I had to quit work. After, I stayed home for 17 years. My girls were finishing high school, decided to go back to work, and wham, I get sick. So now I can't work. I can't wear my clothes. Can't go into the stores to shop for clothes. If I want to send somebody a birthday card, I have to have my husband or my daughter or a friend go buy it because I can't go into the store. And so it kind of I had this very big identity loss. And I kind of felt like, if I sent a card to somebody, it wasn't, yes, I signed it, yes, I wrote a note in it, but the perception of what my daughter thought I would want to give or my girlfriend thought I would like to have, I felt like everything I had was somebody else's choosing, their perception, not necessarily something I would have picked out, but I didn't have a choice. I had to just accept what I could do, what my limitations were. And so I had a huge issue. I still sometimes don't really think I know who I am anymore. I know I'm still me. I still look the same. Well, not necessarily the same, but I'm still the same person. But when you have to go and try to find, if I want to buy a shirt at the store, and I put my mask on, my daughter goes with me, usually she'll go pick out things for me. I run in and try them on and then run out. But then I spend days trying to get the chemicals and the smell of the store, the perfumes out of the clothes before I can even wear them. So it's been a hard time. I'm learning to accept myself as I am without judgment, which is what was really hard to do.
Yes, it's when you touched on the very first part of it, when you were in Dallas and you thought that the friends would call. I know exactly what you're talking about, and I years ago when it happened to me, I came up with a thing that I think my wife hated, but I use it still today. I have a lot of acquaintances, but very, very few friends, because to me, friends are there no matter what happens to you, what happens to them. I would be there for them, but I know exactly what you went through there. It's a difficult lesson to learn, You actually you went through another question that I had for you, and that was, what was your life like before you were ill? I mean, you already touched on some of that. Is there anything you want to add about what your life was really like for quite a few years, I assume?
Yeah, I was 44 when I got sick. So.
Oh, okay.
And like I said, I had worked. Until my younger daughter was born, and then I decided it wasn't cost effective to pay somebody else to watch both of my daughters because they're only 18 months apart, and I just chose to stay home. And I became very active. The girls went to a co-op preschool, so I volunteered my time there. They started kindergarten and first grade. I became a room mother. Shortly after, I ended up PTA president and PTA secretary, and I was involved with that. And then they started band and 4-H, so of course I was a 4-H leader, and the band, I kind of helped out with band things when I could. And then I was on the school board at their school, and you know, my girlfriends, we played bunco once a month at everybody's house, and candles didn't matter. I didn't care what they had in their house. It didn't bother me. And I had a girlfriend that had just gotten her pilot's license, so we flew places and we drove places. You know, we went to lunch. My calendar, I had to look at my calendar every single day, and sometimes twice a day, to see where I was supposed to be, because I was always on the go doing something. And it was mostly volunteer work. And then suddenly, that rug's pulled out from under you, and you can't do any of those things.
Yeah, it sounds like you had a very full life in a way. Because,
I did.
Not many people can say that, you know. They're lucky if they do one thing for anybody, you know, and you were constantly on the go. Again, you were part of I was president of a PTA at the school that my kids went to. And, you know, the people that know me know exactly what I'm like. I raise hell, but I'm there for one reason, and that is to make sure that we get the best we can possibly get. I was actually involved in getting a new principal, because I felt that the last one didn't really, it wasn't the right man to keep order in the school.
Okay.
You know, when most of the kids are taller than you are, you got a little problem, you know. So we got ourselves one that was like 6'3", and all he had to do was walk down the hallway and everything was fine. But that's the way I always thought, and because like I said, I want the kids to be happy, to have the best, and it seems like you did the same thing. No matter where your children were, you were always there to help them. You know?
Yes.
And that I really think that in this day and age, very few people do that anymore, unfortunately.
I wanted to be involved in everything I could be involved in. And when I was in PTA, we did a lot of things that had never happened before. And when my older daughter went into high school, it was a brand new school. There was no money for uniforms for the girls teams. She played volleyball. So next thing I know, I'm part of the beginning of a booster club. And I never said no. I always, if somebody needed something, the kids needed something, I was there. If I was a parent, I felt that was important for me to be involved.
Yes, yes. Well, it's the same thing in our high school. What we did is we at prom night, instead of them going to the shore because we were so close to the Jersey Shore, they would drive down there, and we had statistics of how many children from the Philadelphia area would go down there and get killed on those nights. So what we did is we had an after prom party where they came in, and once they were in, and we had it at a school, not their school, but one of the other schools in the school district, and we would actually turn that into a fantasy land. And the very first year that I did that, everybody looked at me like, what are we going to do? We don't know how to do this. So we created Disney World, and I mean, the kids came out of that, and I wanted the honest opinion. If you didn't like it, but here's the thing, once you're in and the door is locked, you stay till 7 in the morning, or if you have to leave early, your parent has to come pick you up.
Exactly.
I've never had somebody leave, and they all said, oh, you mean it's over? This was too much fun. Why can't we do this all year long, kind of thing?
Yeah, they started doing a grad night at the school where my daughters went to, but I was already sick by the time that got initiated.
I think that's a great, great thing. So, here's my next question. What message would you like to share with others who are dealing with your circumstances or suffer from a chronic illness?
First, I just want to tell them, I know what it's like. I've been there. I'm still there. I'm not as sick as I was, but I understand. And secondly, do not go to a doctor and have them mistreat you, not take your symptoms seriously. Keep looking, because there are doctors out there that will help you. And, and don't be afraid to tell people what's going on. And if you have to let go of a friend because they don't want to come in your house and put on a suit like I've had happen, then the friend wasn't worth keeping. Just hang in there, because there are people that understand. Okay,
great. All right, let's get back to the book at hand.
Okay.
So what's the latest happenings in your book?
The book is actually now released. and it's available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. It's available as a hardbound book, as a paperback, and also as an ebook. And hopefully by the end of this coming weekend, by the first part of October for sure, I'll be doing signed copies through my website in the United States only, and you'll be able to order copies through me as well.
Okay. Any blogs that you're having to announce this? How are you going about advertising it?
I have a book blog tour that Allergic to Life and I are going on starting October 1st. There's 12 fellow bloggers that are going to host me in the form of either a guest post or as an interview. And as part of that, I'm going to be offering 3 signed copies at the end of the tour. At each tour stop, you can go to, it's called Rafflecopter. You click on it, you go in, and you follow the instructions. Either it's like me on Facebook, leave a message on the blog that you've come from, and you earn entry points. And at the end, Rafflecopter will generate 3 names. For that, I'm doing the U.S. for the signed copies, and if you're outside the U.S., I will give you a gift card through Amazon or Barnes & Noble to purchase the book.
Great, great.
And I'm also planning a book launch party in the backyard of friends of ours.
I was just going to ask you about
on
that.
On October 19th. And I've been really fortunate that several of the products that I use, I've contacted the companies and they've sent me nice amounts of samples to hand out at the party.
Great. Because, yeah, I read your little snippet about apparently when you send your notices out, you had the wrong house number.
Oh, yes.
We're only human.
It is human. And I type, since I've been ill, I noticed a lot of issues with my brain. And I type dyslexic. If I'm typing the word you, every single time I type it, it's Y-O-I-U. Why the I gets in there, I don't know, and I know how to spell it. And the address was 1012, and I put 1021. Mailed all my invitations out, and then got a call from the person whose home that it's being held at, because my husband had given his father a copy, handed him a copy, and realized we had the wrong address. But nice thing is, it goes from 1012 to like 1040. There is no 1020s, and we'll put a sign out. It'll be fine. But I kind of feel like if something wrong doesn't happen, or some accident doesn't happen, it's not a party.
Yeah, but that makes it already a little better, I think.
Yeah.
Because it shows that we're all human. So, well, I have to mention that Kathryn did the majority of her book on her own. And then when she did enlist outside help, such as with the cover, she still retained final say on the product. So talk to me a little bit about, and tell the people, let's start with your cover, what you had to go through.
Well, it took me a while to figure out how I wanted to present myself on the cover. My title's Allergic to Life, so how do you do that? And a girlfriend gave me some ideas about, maybe we should shoot something from me being indoors, from the looking at me through my window. So I had all these plans. My daughter's boyfriend was going to shoot the pictures, but he couldn't get, we just couldn't get it to work. Then I called. It took me a while to arrange with an actual photographer to come out. He put a suit on, came in my house, took pictures from the inside, went outside. The cover I chose wasn't originally my first choice. The first choice was this amazing photo, and it just happened that I was standing looking out, and there was the reflection of the tree behind us, and it really kind of captured even more my being alone. But I was so close to the window that there was this big, looked like I had a bubble on my nose, and we couldn't get rid of it. So we came back and reshot, tried to capture it again, we couldn't. And I finally chose the cover that I'm using now. And it took a long time. And then I also had a photo that was going to be on the back of the cover. I was sure it was going to be it. My sister and I went for a ride to a daffodil festival, and there were all these wild daffodils. We took turns taking pictures, and she took this picture of me of the daffodils, and it was just like, oh, that's it. You know, you have that aha moment. That's the one I'm going to use. But it took me over a year to get the idea of what I wanted to do and then to try to figure out how to make it happen.
Yeah, and all the people that will buy this book, they'll see when they see the cover that a lot of thought went into it, and I think it's the perfect one. You know, I don't think you can actually go and design one better than that. And it wasn't really a design; it was just at the moment it was what came out. You know. So now, once you got past that, did you do your own editing, or did you actually have somebody do that for you?
I had it edited.
Okay.
Again, I was very fortunate. The young man my daughter was dating at the time is a book editor. Who would have thought? And so I'd been talking to him about my book, and he had read a little bit, and he out of nowhere just offered to do it for me for free.
Oh, that's great.
So I had it professionally edited. I paid a young woman that I've known for years to take my photo for the cover and design the cover for me.
Okay.
And then I have photos on the inside, and I know how to copy and paste the photo to the page. I know how to do a text box, and that's all I had. That was what was going to look, the inside was going to be. And I read, it's, you know how things just happen.
Right.
A high school classmate that I had reconnected with just like recently, he is in advertising, and he looked at the pictures. He goes, "Oh, let me take him, and I'll do it for you." So wow, you know, now I've got these nice looking photos that I could have never done. They would have been my photos, which would have been maybe scrapbookish looking, you know, not real. And he did an amazing job turning them to black and white, putting the captions on the photos that I wanted. So it's been a ride of a lot of generosity. You know, I've had a lot of generosity shown towards me on a lot of the parts of the book.
Well, that's great. Now we're okay. We're that far. Now we have to publish. What did you do to publish the book?
I thought long and hard about what I was going to do. Was I going to spend a long time sending out letters to, publishing companies trying to get somebody to take my book? I did some reading, and I learned that if they buy, if they give you a commission or whatever, what they call it, that they now have control over your book. And I thought, I've spent all my life, or for many years, dealing with this. It's my baby. It's my story. It's my life. I don't want it changed. I don't want the cover changed. I don't want the inside changed. So I decided to self-publish. And I, checked different ones, and I ended up going with Author House to publish my book.
Okay. We've had a couple of their people on already.
Okay. I think I've watched some of those shows.
Yes. And so far, from what I see, I'm actually about ready to look for a publisher. But that's, it's not really looking for a publisher, but someone that will do the same thing you said, where I want to keep control. I don't want to give up anything.
Yes.
I want to keep control, so I'm looking at the same thing. And I don't want to say I want to be cheap about it, but the more you can retain for a reason, the better off you are.
Yes.
Because,
it's not cheap publishing. It's not cheaping. I bought books to have so I could sign them.
Right.
And then party's not cheap. There's a lot of things that go into the cost before. You don't get. I didn't go into this to become rich. I went there just basically to share my story, and
right.
I just I'd love to make my money back and then some, but time will tell how that goes.
Exactly, one step at a time.
Yes.
So okay, I just wish you the best. That book will do fantastic. But I have to ask, are there any more books in your future? And can you give us a little hint about that?
I'm working with another friend who has environmental illness. We haven't gotten to the point of illustrations yet. We're working on a children's book about, chemical sensitivity. I'm working on possibly doing a book of poetry from women and or men that have chemical sensitivity, because it's amazing how many of us started writing and how poetry kind of became our way of expressing ourselves. So I'm kind of looking into that, possibly with the idea of the money going to a cause.
Okay. Okay, great. Do you remember we had a guest on one night? I believe it was Sonia Marsh. I don't know if you saw that episode. She is doing the same thing, and that is where she's writing a book, but it has like 26 contributors to it, people that made up little blurbs here and there, and she's combining them. The question that they had at the time was the legality of it. Who owns the rights to it? You know, so before you do, you know, it's nice that you're doing these. I'm just trying to give you a little hint. Look into it to make sure that nobody can come back later on and say, well, that's mine. I want my share, and, you know, it was never agreed upon. Because that's the one thing that Sonia said that she had to look into to make sure everything was above board. You know? Yes,
well, I was thinking if I do this, then there has to be legal paper, something drawn up where they're yes. With the understanding that they're contributing their story or their poem, and all the money, once above the cost of getting the initial cost,
right,
goes to, you know, a charity.
Charity. That's great. I think you'll have a lot less problem that way. So, well, before we end our broadcast today, actually, what am I saying tonight? I'm so used to this. Is there anything that you would like to add that we didn't touch on?
No, I think you've covered you know, you've covered a lot. There's a lot of stories in the book about, you know, of my anaphylactic reactions, and, you know, and there's funny stories in there besides just that. You know, I don't think the story's even in the book. I remembered it much later. But there's funny stories. There's a lot of poems, and I even have testing sheets showing how badly I reacted to certain molds. To let, you know, I think, to grasp the understanding of how strong my reactions are. In skin testing, if they put it's a 0.05, which is the amount of serum of a dilution number 1, it's practically full strength, which means if you don't react, you're not allergic to it. My molds were 15s, and each time they go from a 1 to a 2 to a 3, they're, I think, 5 times weaker. So I was barely getting a hint of the mold in those vials when they would eject me, and I would still react. So I included testing sheets to kind of give you an idea what it was like, and you can see how my handwriting changes during the reaction from being fairly normal to being, you know, the whole size of the column.
How about that? Well, you know, again, let me remind our audience that you get a chance, go to Amazon.com and look for Kathryn Treat, Allergic to Life. And like she said, it's available in an ebook, in paperback, and in a hardbound, correct?
Correct.
So I would encourage anybody to you know, it's great reading, and secondary, it's such an education. It's something that I never could even envision. And let me tell you something. The last year, I learned a lot. I thought I had it bad. You know what? Not like that. You know, and I really give you a lot of credit for you know, doing what you did, and then finally bringing the story to life, so that other people who may have been suffering in silence can finally see that, you know what, I'm not alone. There are other people like me, and I'm glad you found a group. Not that I'm glad because somebody else has it, but, you know, you found a group that now can get together and comfort each other, and that's what it's all about, you know.
Yes.
You get a lot more out of that than being alone all the time. So.
Yes, you know, phone calls. The ones that have, some of them can't, you know, do the computers, so we talk on the phone. It's been a really good thing, and like I said, this is my story, but it's also the story of many others. Well,
great. So, Kathryn, I want to thank you for the time to allow us finally to bring your story to our audience. And
Thank
I say
you.
this because, like, as I said before, Kathryn was on our third show of the first season, and due to a hiccup, as I called it, with the on-air system, her whole conversation and video was deleted and lost forever. I thought you were in a group all by yourself, but it turns out that the same thing happened on show number 10, except that this time Google, or YouTube, I should say, lost the whole tape.
Oh, my goodness.
And the only thing that's up there is something gray looking, and you can't play it. So, and I know it was there because we've been watching it. But you know, we're back, and better than ever. Kathryn, it's again a real pleasure to know you and count you as a friend.
Thank you so much.
I hope that someday they'll find medicine or whatever they need to find an answer for you to what afflicts you, and you can go back to a normal life. I guess that's the only question that I really didn't ask. How much research is done, and maybe you can answer that, I don't know if you really know, for your particular problem?
Well, Dr. Ray, who's the environmental health doctor, or the director of the Environmental Health Center in Dallas, has done a lot of research. Dr. William Croft has done a lot of research on the causes of mycotoxins. And you know, there are a lot of doctors out. I mean, there are doctors out there that are environmental doctors, but the sad part is most of them, you know, are up in years. You know, they're not young doctors anymore. And the scary part is when they quit practicing, who's going to do it? Because I don't see a lot of young doctors. I think it's because after some of these doctors, you know, they're older. They're at that point where, you know, they can say, I don't give a darn. I'm gonna take care of these patients. But you know, new doctors starting out, they don't have that. You know, they don't have that
right.
Those years of experience where they can just say, you know, okay, well, I don't care. I'm going to do it anyway.
And the fact, unfortunately, it seems like the more people are afflicted to the same problem, doctors seem to go to that because, again, there are funds there. So they make a living, and that's what it all comes down to. And that's where it's a shame that, you know, there are people suffering, and the research is minimal. It's still done by a few, and thank God for them. You know,
yes.
And hopefully maybe one of them will stumble on something that will make your life much better. I hope that's in your future.
Thank you. It's much better than I never thought I'd be this far. You know, in the beginning, when I was at my worst, I never thought I would even be doing as much as I'm doing now. So there's hope that, you know, if I keep doing what I'm doing and more people become aware of the dangers of chemicals, and you know, it'll be easier to go into places. But you know, the chemical companies, they've got a good lock on all those products. That
Tell me about it. You know, sometimes I figure that half the money they take off of me. Because the VA right now, I guess they have me on 17 pills a day, and when I stop them right away, they yell, you know, because some test doesn't come out right. But you know, I don't want to be a zombie. I want to be a person.
And you don't want to, you know, you want a solution. You don't want to just a Band-Aid to mask the symptoms of what's going on. You want to know. And that's what I think the environmental doctors are doing. You know, they're giving you. You know, they give you supplements. They give you things they test you for things that your body's deficient in, rather than just saying, "Oh, you're depressed. Take a Prozac," or "Oh, you sneeze. You're having really bad allergies. Just take an allergy. Just go take, you know, Zyrtec or whatever other allergy pill is out there." They're doing things to try to solve the problem, not just mask it or give you a Band-Aid.
Right. Well, like I said, again, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. I'm glad we got the opportunity.
We'll see you again during season 2.
I would love it.
If we, you know, I don't know. You've watched some of it. We're going a little deeper into the actual things, and I'm sure Darcy is looking forward to. She'll get in touch with you because she's been asking when I was going to get this done, and I got it done today.
She asked me the other day, actually.
Fit you in, and we'll have you on again. So
okay, I love that. Thank you.
Thank you for being here today, and God bless you.
Thank you, Rudy.